The laws are pretty clear. We had a company, very clear. We had a company, I joined it in '79, and when I started there were about 15 of us, and we sold it in 1998. And at this point we had about 200 employees. And it's always been very clear to me, you're either an employee or you're not. You're an independent contractor or you're not. And I have never had any misunderstanding about that. And I think people who are independent contractors know full and well that they're independent contractors, and that's fine. But when you believe that you're an employee and your employer tells you that you're an independent contractor, that's wrong. And that cannot be tolerated, and that has to change.
Thank you. I might add, as we think about going on to the next question, that we're not making this any easier, by the way, because every time you turn around, there's a new way of doing business. And all the electronics that we've been talking about make it even more possible for new business forms to begin making their way around, and how legislatures and courts are going to respond to this new wave of business forms is a very interesting problem. I don't expect to be around to see the solution, but it's a nice thing to worry about, I guess. Well, editing. Here's a much more specific question. Number 3. Many states, the question goes, have comprehensive public sector collective bargaining legislation. In Tennessee, we have statutory authority for teachers to bargain, and a great many police and firefighters work under memoranda of understanding. Would you support or oppose expansion of Tennessee's public sector laws to include all state and local employees? And explain. Ward?
Well, I may not earn any votes with this answer, but when I entered this race, I said I'm going to be honest and tell everybody exactly what I believe. Not having a political background, what else would I do? And my view of it is, right now, I would oppose it. And the reason I would oppose it is because I think that the K-12 situation in the state has become so inflexible and such a problem that we have lagged in our education, and that has become part of the problem. I also believe that what we need to do right now is going to require so much change and moving so fast that if we don't, we're going to be further behind than we are right now. And the challenge that we have, as I mentioned earlier, is that states are seizing their opportunities, becoming extremely strategic. They are pulling in their business proposition and their job-creating proposition deep into their educational systems, changing the way that they educate, and it is going to take the fleet of foot to be successful going forward over the next 50 years. Now, we live in a world where we have lived under the shadow of a seed that was planted over 60 years ago as the United States industrialized and grew up and prepared to fight World War II. And that took us forward for 60 years. The world has changed. We are impacted in so many ways. We have consumer revolutions in technology and information and energy, education, charter schools, everything is changing. And what we cannot afford to do is be in a situation where we can't make the kind of movement that we need to make. Now, what my proposition is, because I don't want to sit down from this question, having said what I've said, and not make this point perfectly clear. I believe in the green economy, the new economy going forward, that labor has a whole new proposition. And now you're in a better position to decide what it is than I am, but I really believe that it has to do with the education of our students, our youth. But education is no longer for kids. Education is not just lifetime. It's not cradle to grave, it's cradle to cradle. The better we're educated, then the better we're going to raise our children to be educated. Moms in particular who are educated tend to have better educated children. And that's the way we need to go forward. But education is being taken out of the realm of its traditional sense. It's not going to work the same way anymore. 1 out of 6 college students gets their education, 1 out of 6 higher ed students gets their education online. And the Department of Education says they're better trained. Things are going to change a lot. We have to be ready.
What about you, Mike? How do you feel about expanding the existing public sector collective bargaining law?
You know, let me be clear about this. I would consider any legislation that helps to protect the safety of our public service employees and also helps ensure that they have fair and reasonable wages. I know that our public sector employees in many cases are our first offenders, and they're a critical backbone, not only to our state government, but also to our local governments. I also know that many cities operate under memorandums of understanding, and I would encourage, as they deal with their labor negotiations, I would encourage any of those local officials to continue in that regard and use any mediation methods to make sure that we have very open and productive labor negotiations.
Let's get down to the 2 final questions now, both of which are rather general in nature. Number 5 on your list, gentlemen. A recent Congressional Research Service report states, quote, in the 21st century, global competition and rapid advances in science and technology challenge the scientific and technical proficiency of the United States workforce. Policymakers often discuss policy actions that could enhance the nation's science and technology workforce, deemed by some as essential to both meet U.S. workforce demands, as well as to generate new ideas that can lead to improved new industries that create jobs. You've already, both of you, mentioned changes in the education system. Are there other things you would do as governor to address these challenges about adapting to the increasingly technical, scientific world we live in? Mike? You start this time.
You know, this is one of those questions that you could literally talk until all of y'all are asleep. There's no question about the fact when you start looking at what has happened in foreign countries and how they have kept, Japan for example, how they have kept a focus on science and technology starting at early ages, that we have got to do a better job. And I'm not going to worry about the country. I'm talking about just Tennessee. We've got to do a better job of making those kind of courses available here in Tennessee. It starts with pre-K, I believe. I think we're doing a pretty good job in our math department, but we've got to do a better job of developing the curriculum in science and technology at a very, very early age and bringing it forward. It is essential to developing our workforce in this state as we go forward. I believe we've got to make sure that our career centers now are developing the kind of curriculum that addresses the needs that we have got. You know, it's like any other business. You get used to doing that which you know. So we've got to keep pressure